Could you each please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Leah Weckert and I am the Managing Director and CEO of Coles Group.
Thanks, Ms Weckert.
Hello, my name is Vicki and I'm the Government and Industry Relations Manager for Coles Group.
All right, thanks, Ms Bond. I now invite each or both of you to make a short opening statement, at the conclusion of which the committee will have some questions for you.
Thank you, Senators. For more than a century, Coles has been an important part of the Australian community and economy. We proudly employ 120,000 team members, operate more than 850 supermarkets and 960 liquor stores nationally, and process more than 17 million customer transactions each week. We partner with 8,000 valued suppliers, many of whom have worked with us for generations. And with our customers and team members, Coles donates millions of dollars to the communities in which we operate. We spend a lot of time listening to and seeking to understand our customers. We know many of our customers are dealing with the challenges of rising cost of living right now. 13 consecutive rate rises have exacerbated the cost of mortgages and rents. It costs more to run the family car, with fuel prices continuing to increase. And the cost of education, healthcare, insurance, energy and transport also continue to rise. At Coles, we cannot influence these household expenses, but we can do, and what we do is give customers the best value possible on their grocery bill, while balancing this with paying our suppliers fairly and reinvesting in our business to keep it efficient. As a customer-led organisation, our customers expect us to continue to provide a choice of quality products across a range of value propositions to suit their budget and the needs of their household, and we are committed to providing this. This is something we remain very focused on, because we know if we don't, customers may have many other alternatives from which to purchase their food and groceries. We cannot provide great quality products to our customers without our suppliers and our team members. We're proud to be the retailer of choice for many suppliers to range their products, and without them we cannot succeed. Claims have been made about how we interact with our suppliers. We acknowledge that we don't always get it right, but all of our procedures seek to ensure fair and sustainable relationships. What has been missing in the conversation to date is the many suppliers who choose Coles, suppliers who have been working with Coles for generations, some for more than 50 years. Australian businesses who have benefited because of Coles's Australia First sourcing policy, which leads to all of our Coles own brand fresh beef, lamb, pork, chicken, turkey, duck, milk and eggs being sourced 100% from Australia, and around 96% of all of our fresh produce. We value our supplier relationships and work hard to interact in a fair, honest and transparent manner. If a supplier does have a concern, not only do we have confidential, robust internal mechanisms, but we are bound by the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct, which has alternative complaint mechanisms and is enforced by the ACCC. However, we are listening, and we acknowledge some of the concerns that have been raised by the farming sector, particularly the horticultural sector, around price transparency. Coles would be very willing to be part of a solution that would involve greater transparency for fresh produce growers. Our team members are the critical link between our suppliers and our customers. They are working every day to bring great quality products into our stores and to give customers a welcoming experience when they shop with us. We are proud that thousands of our team members have worked with us for more than 20 years, and that we continue to give so many young Australians their very first job. We are also proud of how, together with our suppliers and our logistics partners, our team members ensured the provision of food and groceries across Australia during the difficult COVID years. For all of these reasons, 120,000 team members, 8,000 supplier relationships, 17 million customer transactions per week, it is important that Coles is a sustainable, profitable enterprise. For every $100 spent in our stores, Coles makes $2.60 in profit, or less than 3 cents.
I'm sorry, $2.60.
$2.60. $2.60 in profit, or less than 3 cents for every dollar. Compared to many other industries, this is a very small margin. This margin has remained consistent over the last 5 years, It did not increase with the rise in inflation, and it is consistent with the profit margins made by supermarkets overseas. The Australian grocery sector is highly competitive. We have to compete for customers, suppliers and team members, all of whom have many options for where they shop, where they sell their products and where they work. At Coles, we welcome competition and we encourage governments to invest in infrastructure and to minimise regulation to make Australia a more attractive market in which to do business. More than 100 years after opening its first store, Coles continues to be a successful Australian business contributing to the Australian economy. This is because we listen to our customers and respond to their changing needs. We strive to treat our suppliers fairly and invest in long-term partnerships with them, and we value our hard-working team members. Thank you, Senators, and we'd now be happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Ms Weckert. I'll kick us off. Thank you for your opening statement, but fair to say that a lot of what you said in that statement has actually been contradicted by other evidence that this committee has received over the course of our inquiry. So I'll just try and wrap that up and put it to you and ask you for a response. So based on the evidence that we've received, and quite a bit of it, your company, Coles, along with Woolworths, enjoys a market domination in Australia's supermarket sector, a sector that has far less competition than comparable markets overseas. In the past decade, you, along with Woolworths, have used this market domination to put the squeeze on your suppliers, including farmers, to force down wages of your workers and compromise staff safety, and to price gouge your customers. Countless Australians are currently skipping meals, they're dumpster diving and they're eating less healthy food because they can't afford your prices. You've thrived in a weak regulatory environment, you've engaged in anti-competitive behaviour and you've convinced large parts of this parliament not to rein you in. With all that evidence that we've received, do you still deny that you've used your market dominance to do over farmers and suppliers, to do over your workers and to price gouge your shoppers?
Thank you for the question, Senator. There's quite a bit in there, so if I may, I'll take each of those topics separately.
Please.
The first thing I would say is that we, as I mentioned, spend a lot of time listening with our customers, and so we are very aware at the moment that cost of living is a significant issue for Australian families and Australian households, which is why we have been very focused on, during this period where we have seen food inflation, and that food inflation has largely been driven by supply chain shocks and issues that we have seen globally in the food and grocery market, which has resulted in cost price increases coming through from many of our suppliers. That has driven prices up. But what we have sought to do is to keep prices as low as possible and deliver value to customers. And I would note that food inflation in Australia has been lower over the last few years than what we have seen in most other OECD countries around the world. And I think we do put that down to the fact that the market here in Australia is very competitive. We are working every day to help customers find value in our stores. We're doing that through thousands of specials that we provide every week. We do that through an extensive own brand portfolio. So we have over 6,000 products in our own brand portfolio which provide customers with a more affordable option that they can trade into. We also have our Flybuys program where customers can collect a point for every dollar they spend in our store, as well as bonus points. And actually over the last 12 months we've made moves to make it much easier for customers to redeem those points and get dollars off their shop in our stores by making it easier to redeem those points when they're in the store at the checkout purchasing their products. So there are a wide range of initiatives we are working to help customers access value. You mentioned some examples there of households which are having to resort to extreme means to feed their families. We are passionately committed to supporting our two partners, Second Bite and Food Bank, through providing edible food that is not able to be sold in our stores. And last year we provided the equivalent of over 40 million meals of food to those two organisations that they're able to pass on to community kitchens and pantries. And so, that is something as an organisation we're very passionate about doing our part to ensure that we're supporting on that front as well. If I could talk quickly about the market competition here versus overseas. We do believe the market here in Australia is very competitive. If you, as a customer, go to your local shopping centre, it is more than likely that you will have the choice of 2 or 3 supermarkets, potentially a Coles, a Woolworths, an Aldi, maybe an independent. You'll also likely have access to a number of specialist retailers, so a butcher, a bakery like a Baker's Delight, probably a couple of greengrocers. And unlike many overseas jurisdictions where those specialist retailers are quite often not co-located with the large supermarkets, in Australia it is a real feature of the market here that right out the front of our stores is where you will most likely find those competitors that we have. Now, you've got all of that when you go to the shopping centre, but before you even left home, you could have bought your dishwashing tablets, your nappies, your toilet paper on Amazon, and you could have stopped in at Bunnings or Chemist Warehouse on the way to the shopping centre to pick up vitamins, pet care, cleaning. So there are a lot of players that are playing in the space around grocery, and we do think the fact that the food inflation being lower in Australia versus other OECD countries over the last period, a point of evidence on that is the strong competition that we have here. You also talked about our team and that there has been evidence that we have been driving down wages and have not been focused on safety. I can absolutely say that safety is a top priority for us at Coles. We have worked very hard over the last decade to drive down the number of safety incidences we have across our organisation. We are constantly looking for opportunities to improve, to engineer out safety risks in our business, and we have important partnerships that really focus on this. For example, the supply chain charter that we have with the TWU, which specifically focuses on supply chain safety, for example. We also have a very large team, 120,000 people, and last year we paid over $5 billion in wages to that team, wages and salaries. That number has gone up by around $600 million over the last 4 years. And that has been driven by increases that we have seen come through the Fair Work Commission. So, for example, all of our wage team members received 5.75% increase in their pay from the 1st of July this year, and also an additional 0.5 percentage point of superannuation guarantee. So that is a substantial increase that we have gladly passed on to our team, because we know that they work very hard and they're an incredible part of the Coles business, and we're very proud of what they do for us every day. You also talked about suppliers. My contention would be we have over 8,000 suppliers that we deal with for the provision of products and services across Coles. Many of them have worked with us for long times. If I look in the farming community at many of our suppliers that provide us with beef or fresh produce items, we are talking about farming families who have supplied product to us for 20, 30, 40, even in some instances 50 years that they have worked with us. And we always work to build mutually beneficial relationships with our suppliers, and I just don't think our suppliers would stay with us for a long period of time, as much as 50 years, if that was not the case, if we were not working to build those long-term relationships. And then the last point that you touched on was the regulatory environment. I think that the regulatory environment in Australia with regards to the food and grocery space could probably be described as world-leading. And actually you've seen other jurisdictions like the UK and New Zealand actually move to put in place many of the mechanics that we have had here for some time, like the food and grocery code. So we certainly feel that we have a complex set of stakeholders, but we are working hard every day to try and balance out a good set of outcomes for all of them.
Thanks, Ms Weckert, for responding so comprehensively to that question. Were you watching the committee's hearing this morning?
I did watch the committee, well, some of it. I missed some of it because we were in transit, but okay. I did see some of it.
Are you aware that we had a fairly lengthy discussion about return on equity?
I did happen to see that part of the discussion, yes.
Well, to be fair, there was more than one. To be fair, there was more than one part, Ms Weckert, but anyway, that's fine. Do you accept that return on equity is an accepted measure of the profitability of a company?
I accept that there are multiple different measures that can be looked at for returns for a company.
And ROE is one.
And ROE is one such measure.
All right, thank you. And it's a common measure, is it not? One of the measures, but it's a common measure to be used. It
certainly is a measure that I think in some industries in particular it is used extensively. I would say that it's not a measure that we use a lot in the grocery space.
Understood. What was the net profit of Coles last year?
The net profit of Coles last year was just over $1 billion.
So about 1.1 in round figures?
Just under that, I think. I think it's not quite enough to round up, but yes.
Okay. All right, so just
over $1 billion.
Okay, just over $1 billion. And what's the size of your equity base?
I don't have that to hand, but I am happy to share with you that our return on equity last year was 31%.
Thanks.
If I may, I wouldn't mind making just a few clarifying comments in regards to the use of that number, if that's okay. So, as I mentioned, there are a number of return metrics that are commonly used. Return on equity is one of them, and we had a return on equity of 31%. There's also return on capital, which is the number that we use in our business and is part of the incentives that are put in place for our executives. That was 15% for us last year. You can also look at ROIC, which was 11%, or return on assets, which was 6%. And I think the key thing is to work out which is the appropriate return metric to use. I would highlight that equity is a historical number, and so it's actually quite difficult to compare return on equities across businesses. I know there was some discussion this morning around the use of it in the banking sector, where it is very appropriate because under prudential regulations that they have, the banks have to hold equity against every loan that they write, and so they're continually increasing their equity on the balance sheet so that the value is current. So their ROE is always going to be lower than what we would have in the grocery space, where we do not mark to market our equity base. It's probably akin to if you bought a house 30 years ago, the equity on that would be much lower than if you bought a house 10 years ago. Coles has been operating in Australia now for over 100 years, and so a lot of our equity and asset base has been in place for a long time. In regards to comparisons with ROE internationally, there is quite a unique aspect of the grocery market in Australia, which is the vast majority of our properties that we have, our stores, are leased. So 99% of our stores are leased. If you compared it to the UK, stores like companies like Tesco or Sainsbury's would have in excess of 30% of their property portfolio which they own. And so they would hold equity against those buildings and those pieces of land on the balance sheet. As we don't own those assets, we don't hold equity on the balance sheet, and so necessarily our equity, and therefore the denominator we're dividing by here, is lower, and so you end up with a higher ROE. So I completely acknowledge that it is an important return metric used, but I think it is important to take it in the context of the different market conditions we have. And whether it's possible to compare it across industries, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. So in the US, the average return on equity for grocery retailers is 15%. In the in the EU, it is 5%. Now, even accepting the differences in the equity base that you've just spoken about, that's a very stark difference, is it not, in a measure that is generally accepted as a reasonable way to assess the profitability of a company?
So, as I said, in terms of understanding how you can compare it across jurisdictions, I think you have to look at the specifics. Obviously, we've worked to get that number ready to come in today based on the conversation this morning. I'm happy to take it away and on notice in terms of our perspectives on comparability across other jurisdictions.
All right, thanks, Ms Weckert. What was your personal remuneration from Coles in the last financial year?
So my salary, my base salary last year was $1.2 million, and my total compensation was $3.3 million. I do acknowledge that I only came into the CEO role very, very late in the year, and when I came into the CEO role, I did receive an increase in my base salary.
All right, when did you commence as CEO?
The 1st of May.
The 1st of May last year.
For the financial year 2023 year, so 2 months of the financial year, I was in that role.
Okay. So those figures you just quoted, were they just your remuneration as CEO, or was that your remuneration? Sorry, did you come from Coles?
I did come from Coles. I have quoted you my total compensation at Coles for the year of the financial year 2023.
Okay. All right, thank you. And so is it accurate that you haven't yet clocked up a full financial year as CEO?
Correct.
That's correct. All right, thank you. What's the full adult base hourly rate for a shop floor worker at Coles?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, $25.27.
$25.27. So we've had evidence that workers at major supermarkets, part of the duopoly, I'll come to market competition in a minute, so you can just don't have to respond to my duopoly comment. I'll give you an opportunity on that later, but just that shop floor workers who work a lot of hours basically don't shop at Coles or Woolworths because they just can't afford to survive if they're doing that. Do you have a response to that?
Vicki, I know we provided some numbers in the questions on notice. Do you want to outline that?
So our team members every week, we have about 500,000 team member transactions. So team members that shop in our stores, and we know that because they're using team member cards, so about 1 million every 2 weeks. In terms of our team members, we pay them, as our CEO Leah said, above award rates, and as you know, minimum wages are decided on by the independent body, the Fair Work Commission, and Coles pays it above those. And as you also know, the Fair Work Commission takes into account a whole range of factors when it's deciding on a minimum wage, which includes the cost of living and future economic situations. So our team members, Senator, as I said, we have about 1 million transactions every fortnight.
Do you offer a staff discount?
Yes, we do.
Do you have access to that, Ms Weckert?
I do have access to it as a team member, yes.
Do you use it?
I do.
You do?
Yeah,
So
I've been a team member at Coles for 13 years and I have used it throughout my time.
All right. Are you able to disaggregate your remuneration in the last full financial year in terms of what you received prior to assuming the CEO's position and how much of that was what you earned or what you received post your assumption of the CEO's position?
We would be able to do that, but I don't have that to hand today.
Could you take that on notice, please?
We can.
Right, thank you. So I want to ask you about how your company responds when a supplier requests a price increase. So you're probably aware we've heard some evidence on this from Mr. Badura yesterday. So when a supplier requests a price increase, do you typically pass on 100% of that price increase to consumers?
So maybe if I just take a step back and talk about the process that we use. So when a package company, and I think this is a package-specific case that the witness was speaking about, when they submit a cost price increase, we ask them for as much detail as they are able to tell us, and we don't ask for confidential or commercially sensitive information, but we do ask them to help us to understand what has driven the cost increase that they are requesting, so that we can understand whether the movements, for example, in commodities or freight costs or things like that can be validated on what we are seeing externally from a whole heap of indicators. In the last couple of years, we have seen an unprecedented amount of cost price increases come through, and in the vast majority of cases, they have been validated because of the external shocks that we've seen to things like, the price of wheat corresponding with the start of the Ukraine war, the additional shipping costs, and there's been quite a bit of evidence to the committee on these issues already. So once we have validated that, and we would accept it from the supplier then, because we do take a view that if it is a valid cost increase that we should accept it because that is fair to the supplier. We then have to make the decision about what is the increase or change to the retail price that is charged to the customer. And there are multiple factors that are taken into account for that. So one aspect would be the amount of the cost increase that has come through from the supplier. Another would be the price in terms of where we'll be placed from a competitive perspective on that product. We would also consider things like the importance of that product to the customer and whether we in fact would like to make an investment in value which could lead to not all of it being passed on. So there are multiple factors that go into it. But I would say, particularly over the last couple of years, a large amount of the cost increases that have come through have been passed on to the consumer.
Okay. So are you able to provide any clarity on what proportion of the price increases that have occurred, say, over the last couple of years have been passed on in full to the consumer?
What I would probably say is it would be the vast majority have either been passed on in full or partially. Yep.
So I'm interested in how you would categorise the proportion of price increases that you've paid to suppliers, how you would categorise that proportion in terms of whether they've been passed on in full to the consumer.
Understood. I do not have that to hand, but we can take that on notice.
All right. Would your data sets allow you to come back with a question,
yes,
a response to that?
We'll be able to give a directional view on that.
All right, thank you. Because, look, the reason I ask is that if you pass on, if you maintain your profit margin on a product A, if you pay an increase to the supplier because you've gone through that process you just ran us through, and you've determined that it's a reasonable increase, so you've accepted an increase in price from your supplier, if you retain your profit margin, then your profit on product A in dollar terms goes up, doesn't it?
So it depends at what level that you're looking at the profit on. So when we think about profitability on products or at a category level, we would typically think about what we would call the direct product profitability, which is an end-to-end view of the total cost on a product. So obviously, the product that we pay, the price we pay to a supplier for a product, is not the only cost that we have associated with retailing it. We have a huge amount of labour in the stores. Some of our departments are higher labour than others, and labour has been a part of our cost base that has increased significantly. We have the logistics costs associated with distributing it from the DC to the 850 supermarkets we have around the country, a big part of which, again, is labour for the truckies, but also the fuel to actually transport it around. Both of those aspects have increased as well. There's also been increases in our rent, and so different products, when you take the end-to-end view, will have had different impacts from the cost of doing business increases that Coles has also seen during this period.
Understood, Ms Weckert. And just to be clear, I won't speak on behalf of the committee, but I completely accept that your cost of doing business has gone up, like everybody else's, I might add, or almost everybody else's, perhaps everybody else's, over the last few years. I completely accept supply-side issues, completely accept, international geopolitical events and climate change wreaking havoc on supply chains. I accept all that. But what I want to specifically ask you is, if you accept a price increase from a supplier, all other things being equal, if you maintain your profit margin, or your margin expectation, I think you call it in the business, if you maintain that, then if you pay more to the supplier, the profit you make in dollar terms on that item will go up, won't it?
So if we pass
all
on
other
the
things being equal.
If we pass on the dollar amount, then
if you maintain, so I just want to be clear about my question.
Yep,
if you maintain the same percentage
so
margin,
profit margin, okay.
If you maintain that, all other things being equal, so freight, shelving prices, shelving costs, whatever, stacking the shelves, whatever else it is, all other things being equal, if you maintain the same profit margin, but you increase the price you pay to the supplier, then the dollar value of your profit on that item goes up, doesn't it?
Mathematically, that's correct.
That's correct. Thank you. I want to just, I'll ask the Secretariat staff if they could just put a document in front of you, and I'll also circulate this document to my colleagues. That's the two there. Just pass that down. So, Ms Weckert, this I'll seek the committee's agreement to table this document in due course. But this is someone who's previously worked at Coles head office, as you can see there, between 2009 and 2022, and they were very nervous about getting in touch with my office about this, but they felt morally obliged to do so, and they've given me permission to make this document public and to ask you questions about it. As you can see there, this person has informed my office that in the event of a cost increase request from a supplier that is granted by Coles, the email then says Coles then decides how much of that cost increase to pass on to consumers. In my experience, this was always 100%. In addition, they, being Coles, would increase the price by more than 100% to ensure they were holding gross margin percentage. Doesn't that say that every time Coles agreed to an increase in cost from a supplier, that in fact you maintained your gross margin percentage and therefore the dollar value of your profit, as you just indicated on a mathematical basis, actually increased?
So I think we would need to take this away. It's quite a bit of detail to absorb on the spot, but certainly there will be circumstances where we have not passed on 100% as well. So I think to make a statement that this is always 100%, I don't think will be accurate.
Well, this particular whistleblower has said that in their experience it was always 100%, so I guess it's possible that their experience didn't cover a full range of your products, but in any event, this person, who I can assure you is an entirely credible whistleblower who is very anxious about coming forward because they fear retribution, has said that in their experience it was always 100%.
As I've said, we're happy to take away on notice to have a look at the amount that's passed on in full and partially. But I think to characterise as it is in this email that our NPAT soared during 2021-2022, our net profit after tax margins have remained relatively consistent over time. And if I look at the period between 22 and 23, the most recent year, we actually saw a decline in our net profit after tax in terms of both the absolute number and the margin, which would indicate that the additional costs that we are seeing in our business, which have been a feature of all food and grocery supply chains around the world, that has impacted our margin over that time.
Do you retain your historical costs of the goods that you sell and the historical prices that you charge?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Vicki?
No, I don't.
We'll have to take that on notice. I'm sorry.
All right. This whistleblower states in the email to my office that the practice that they've outlined there is completely unfounded in reason other than greed. Do you have a response to that?
That is not my experience. My experience of our category teams is that they are very customer focused and that we as an organisation are very focused on putting value into the hands of consumers, which is why certainly since I've come into the CEO role, we have made substantial investments into value campaigns through our Great Value Hands Down program and through making Flybuys points redemption more available to customers. We definitely know that unless we are providing a compelling offer to our customers, they have lots of options to go other places to shop, and that would impact our sales. And so it's something that we have been extremely focused on for as long as I have been at Coles, but definitely over the last 12 months in the context of the external environment we are in, where we know that Australian households are really struggling with cost of living, it's something we have been particularly focused on.
All right. Would you accept that when you do increase the price you pay to a supplier, that you typically would maintain your gross percentage margin on the product?
As I said, I'm going to have to take that away on notice.
Have you had an opportunity to review the testimony of Mr. Badura?
I have not personally, no.
Some of it.
Okay, so Mr. Badura has provided this committee with some emails, correspondence that he had with Coles, or with a person in Coles. For one particular product category, Mr. Badura was advised on the 2nd of November 2022 that the margin expectation started at 39% for this particular product category, and then In May 2023, so let's say almost precisely 7 months later, Mr Badura was emailed about the margin expectation for exactly the same product category and told that it was 45%. So the margin expectation has gone up somewhere in the range of 6%. Have you got a response to that?
Perhaps just if I can sort of answer in the beginning. I'm aware that Mr Badura approached Coles in 2022 to retail his product. He then approached Coles again, I believe, in 2023. It was during a range review. He wanted to introduce a new product. Coles didn't range his product. We didn't enter into any negotiations with him about that product, is my understanding. So I don't. He may not be talking about that. So just in case he is, that's the context in terms of if it's his own product he's talking about, or it could be the Coles supplier that he used to work for until recently. But I'm not sure.
Does Coles ever increase its margin expectations for the same product category over time?
So even within categories, we have products which are different margins. And so if you take products...
Just asking about the change in margin expectation, Ms Weckert.
It's not something that I would say we have... It would be a significant feature of how we think about our categories. What we are really thinking about when we are doing range reviews for categories is, from a customer perspective, what are all the products that they would have demand for? And so that's going to vary from products which are at what I'd call an entry price point position, which are very good value for the customer. And we would typically see those types of products would have lower margins on them. If you're at the higher end, which is around a product that's particularly premium, or it may be innovative and have particular characteristics, then the expectation is that that would probably have a higher margin within the category. And so I think...
The change in margin... I'm asking specifically... Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm asking specifically about the change in margin expectation and whether Coles has ever increased your margin expectation on the same product.
Of the nature of the change that you were talking about there, I have not encountered that, no.
All right. Could you take that question on notice, please?
We can.
Yep, thank you. And if you have, could you provide details to the committee in terms of what product, or take on notice the question around what product and what changes to the margin expectation over what period of time?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Now, you've said in your evidence, Ms Weckert, that you think you operate in a highly competitive sector. I have to say to you that's certainly not the opinion of a number of renowned competition experts in this country, Professor Alan Fells, Professor Rod Sims, both former chairs of the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission. I want to ask you specifically about the supermarket sector. I understand you'll probably want to talk about the grocery sector more broadly, but would you accept that in the supermarket sector you operate in a highly concentrated environment and that together with Woolworths you enjoy a significant market domination?
So in the supermarket sector, and maybe if I can just clarify what you would define by that, Senator, but I assume that it includes Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, the independent supermarkets,
yes,
and Costco?
Yes.
Right. So if we look over the last 15 years, for example, going back to maybe 2008 when the last ACCC inquiry was done into the sector, at that point in time, Aldi had 216 stores. Today they have 573 stores.
There's a few open protests there in front of you. Okay, I need to catch up.
Sorry.
That's okay. The point that I was trying to make is they've had significant expansion over the last 15 years. At the time of the last ACCC inquiry, Costco was not even present in the Australian market. They now have 15 of their club stores around Australia. Their stores are much, much bigger than ours in terms of how much they take each week. So, one Costco store is probably the equivalent of 5 or 6 of ours in terms of sales volume. And so they're two very significant, large global players that have come into the supermarket space. At the same time, we have actually seen the independent sector very resurgent over the last few years. During COVID, they benefited hugely from the fact that lots of customers chose to shop more locally, and so they wouldn't visit large shopping centres and the like, and there are lots and lots of small independents, IGAs and Foodlands and the like, which do have more of a standalone feature to the type of property they're in. So if I look at the IGA network, even just last year, they expanded their store network by 39 stores. So I would say we have actually seen an enormous amount of increased competition come into the supermarket sector across the last 15 years.
All right. But you would have to agree, Ms Weckert, that compared to similar jurisdictions like the US and the UK, Australia's supermarket sector is stunningly concentrated, as Professor Sims has stated.
So I don't think that concentration equals a lack of competition. And so if you have a look around the world, there are markets which are not dissimilar to ours in terms of population level, which have similar levels of concentration. We also see countries, like you've mentioned, with the US and the UK.
Which countries would you argue fall into that category?
Well, so Norway or the Netherlands or New Zealand will all be examples where you see
Not sure New Zealand's a terrific example given what the New Zealanders are paying for their food and groceries at the moment.
So, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there is quite a high correlation between the degree of concentration that you see in grocery markets globally and the population that is available to be serviced. And that's further exacerbated in the Australian context because we're such an enormous landmass with a population that is actually quite sort of spread out in terms of the population centres that we have. So if you looked at the US, for example, they would have not a dissimilar level of geographic spread, but they have more than 10 times the population that we have. And when you actually look at sort of regional centres, for example, Texas or Florida are two great examples. There's also examples up in the northeast. You do see significant concentration in the grocers there. So H-E-B in Texas and Publix down in Florida. And I think part of the reason for that is that you do need economies of scale to run large grocery businesses. And Australians benefit hugely from the economies of scale that we have in running a national chain. One of the benefits is definitely the fact that despite all that geographic spread and that fact that many of our stores are in locations like Port Douglas and Whyalla and Karratha and Perth and even our stores down in Tasmania, we are able to offer statewide pricing across our stores. So in South Australia, if you buy products in Adelaide or you buy them in Whyalla, you will pay the same price for packaged groceries. I actually was quite struck by this the other day. One of my relatives had come down from the west part of SA for a medical appointment, and when asked how long was it going to take her to get home, she said, well, it's going to take a bit longer because I have to stop at Whyalla on the way to do the grocery shop because it's so much cheaper than what I'm able to get in my local town. And the fact that we are able to offer statewide pricing and in many cases national pricing, so you take items like milk or pasta or rice, a lot of our core pantry items, they are nationally priced. That is a benefit that Australians get from having the large economies of scale over a country of this size.
Look, I've got a few other questions I want to ask, but I do need to share the call with my colleagues. But before I do, we put some questions on notice to you as part of this inquiry, and one of those was asking you to provide information relating to your prices and your margins. In question 25 on notice, I asked you to provide average and highest profit margins across your categories for the last 10 years, and you've refused to provide that to the committee, claiming that that information is commercial in confidence. In question 24, we asked for your overall value sales growth compared to total units sold. Now, you did provide your operating revenue and year-on-year growth, which actually can be found in your financial reports, but without total units sold, we have no way of knowing whether the growth in operating revenue was based on comparable growth in units or just an increase in your own profits. I just wanted to ask, why won't you provide this information to the committee? Because if you claim that you're not price gouging your customers, providing that information would actually substantiate that claim. But in the absence of you providing that information, you really have no way of proving to the Australian people that you're not price gouging.
Thank you for the question, Senator. We certainly have sought to be as helpful as we can be with the provision of information. As I hope you can appreciate, we are a listed enterprise and we have obligations on us from ASIC in the regards to market-sensitive information. Our assessment is that that margin information by category is very sensitive information that would be of interest to the market and also to competitors. And so we do not want to breach any of those obligations. It was helpful to hear the articulation that you made in terms of what you're looking for in terms of the units sold piece, because what we could provide alongside the operating revenue is the inflation that we have seen in the business for each of those years lined up against that, which will give you an indication of how much the sales growth is driven by volume versus price.
All right, thank you. Will you provide to the ACCC all the information and data that they ask for as part of their inquiry?
So we understand through the ACCC process that there are confidentiality measures that are in place that would enable us to provide that data that I've just explained to them without breaching any of our obligation, and that is certainly our intention to do that. So just to be clear, you will provide the ACCC with everything they ask for as long as you're assured that the confidentiality arrangements are satisfactory? We intend to... Full cooperation? We intend to fully cooperate.
Are you aware you can supply that to this committee in camera?
I think the issue is that it still is providing it to outside actors in terms of a disclosure obligation.
Well, the ACCC are outside actors.
But there are measures in place that will give us protections under that process. So, I'm happy to take away and talk to our legal advisors again on what we can provide. I absolutely can give you the inflation numbers lined up against those operating revenue numbers, which you can imply from that what degree of the sales has been driven by price versus how much has been driven by volume.
All right, thank you.
Chair, may I just intervene and let the witness know that in order to not provide the information, Coles would need to provide a public interest reason rather than a commercial or market reason for withholding that information. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Senator Pratt and Ms Weckert. Thanks for your offer to continue engaging with the committee on this issue, and we'll be in touch with you about the potential provision of that information on an in-camera basis to the committee. Before I offer...
Sorry, just to clarify, I'm happy to provide the inflation data, but any provision of the margin data which we would judge to be market sensitive would need to be fully discuss with our legal advisors.
I understand that, and thank you for indicating that you're prepared to do that, and we'll be in touch with you about that. I can indicate to you the committee does have in-camera provisions which would make it an offence for anyone to release that data outside the committee process. Look, just back to... and I'll come to Senator Kovacic shortly, but just in relation to the matter I was raising with you earlier about Mr Badura. So, and this was, just to refresh your memory, this was an increase in the margin expectation from 39% to 45% over a 7-month period. Mr Badura has confirmed that the margin expectations were both in relation to exactly the same product in exactly the same category, and it was a product from a supplier that he worked for and on behalf of that supplier. So that is clear evidence that the margin expectation for the same product, the exact same product in the exact same category, has increased in the region of 6% in 7 months. Do you have a response to that?
If you're happy to share the specifics with us, we're happy to look into that matter.
But I mean, that's a large increase in your margin expectation in a short period of time, as Weckert.
As I said, there's not been the experience that I have had that is the case in terms of how we operate.
So you haven't ever you're not aware of any such significant increase in margin expectation over such a short period of time through your time with Coles?
The amount of margin increase that you were talking about there, I have not encountered before. As I said, we're happy to take some specifics and have a look at it.
Okay, thanks. Senator Kovacic.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your evidence so far. I wanted to speak to the current environment, and we are in a cost of living crisis where individuals are struggling to pay for many, many things, not just their groceries. I'd like your insights, in terms of how we navigate this and how you navigate Coles' position and their profit position, given consumers are taking a massive hit, small suppliers are taking a massive hit, but effectively it appears that the supermarkets are functioning, as per normal. They don't seem to be taking a massive hit as the rest of the economy that deals with it is. So the margin is effectively intact for you guys.
Thank you for the question, Senator. As I highlighted before, it is a very challenging environment that we're in at the moment, with lots of competing stakeholders who have very valid needs in terms of consumers looking to find value, team members. We need to ensure that we're supporting them so that they are seeing increases in their wages, which support them being able to continue to enjoy the lifestyle they have as well as our suppliers who have had a lot of cost increases come through. And so that is a very challenging environment to get the balance right on all of that. All three of those cohorts are cohorts that we focus on a lot within our business. As I highlighted before, the financial year 2023, we actually saw a decline in our net profit margin, but also in our absolute NPAT, or net profit, I should say, that we generated from our supermarkets and liquor businesses. And that was despite the fact that we have expanded in terms of the number of stores, that we have increased our capabilities with online. So we have put more measures into the system to drive additional sales. And yet that has not, in fact, led to an increase in our profits. At best, they could be described as flat.
In terms of the supply increases. Could you give us an insight into where most of that is coming from? So are they coming from small business suppliers? Are they coming from large Australian suppliers? Or are they coming from multinational suppliers? So is there a trend or a pattern as to where you are seeing the largest price increases across grocery and or fresh food lines?
Thank you for the question. I think we would probably characterise it that all suppliers are seeing increases to their cost base. And so, that is leading to challenging cost structures regardless of whether you are big or small. We would certainly say that because of just the nature of our business, which is that a substantial volume of the products that we sell, particularly in the packaged space, come through from the multinational companies, the impacts of those cost price increases are definitely the most substantial.
Do you face a greater pressure then to pass on those price increases given the nature and the scale of those suppliers and effectively the power that they wield in terms of the products that they supply that are, effectively, cupboard and shelf staples and basics that Australians need?
So there are many categories where the multinational players have very significant levels of concentration. So if you think about areas like soft drinks or snacks or confectionery or biscuits, they have high levels of concentration from certain suppliers. And I would describe them as absolute must-have brands, which is that our customers come into our stores and they expect to be able to find those products. They're a core part of their weekly shop and they're much loved brands. And so the ability for us to end up in a situation where supply is withheld because we would not accept a cost price increase is quite challenging in those categories for us because they are such a significant part of it and customers love them so much. We have definitely seen some instances overseas with some retailers who have certainly in the last 12 months got into conversations which have led to those situations with some of the large food and grocery players.
Have you had situations or circumstances where you felt that if you didn't pass on that supply cost increase in terms of grocery prices to customers, that those much-loved brands that we expect to see in Coles and Woolworths would actually have been withheld from you?
I would like to say that at this stage we are closely working in partnership with suppliers. We acknowledge that they have had significant increases to their cost base, and so seeing an increase in the cost that is paid for that product, that is fair, so that they can continue to earn a reasonable margin or a reasonable return. And I would clarify that, ultimately we are the ones who set the retail price, whereas the supplier is typically the one who is coming and asking for a particular wholesale or cost of goods price. But it definitely, as we go forward from this position, where we have seen a lot of that inflation come through the system, we are now seeing areas where commodities are coming off, and we are starting to have conversations with our suppliers which would say we have seen a reduction in this input, for example, and can we find a cost saving there that we could pass through to consumers? They're going to be really important conversations as we go forward from here.
So their influence would be very different than perhaps from a grower or a farmer, where you've got some options on, where to get your broccoli or your oranges or your grapes, versus, somebody that's providing a packaged good that somebody else can't deliver or can't produce. So you don't have any other option, effectively, rather than to acknowledge that you're the price setter in the retail space, but they are effectively the price setter in the wholesale space. So you'll be adding your margin to whatever it is effectively that they tell you can sell the product for. Otherwise, you don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'd like to believe that we, as a food and grocery industry, which includes the manufacturers and the suppliers, can work together to bring prices down for customers as we go forward from here. I would say, or I would highlight, that in the fresh produce space and the meat space, for example, consumers have enjoyed deflation in those two big category areas really since July of 2023. So it's been many months now that consumers have been enjoying cheaper prices year on year on fruit and vegetable products and in particular red meat products.
Thank you. My next question relates to physical cash on hand at supermarkets. Are you having issues with physical cash on hand due to the ongoing issues with Armaguard?
Thank you for the question. It's certainly one that is very topical at the moment. I think you may be referring to some media that was published just before Easter, where we had made some changes to our cash management processes as we came into what is our second largest trading weekend for the year after Christmas. We did not actually, despite what was reported in the media, we did not actually have any stores that were not able to trade in cash. And so we've had relative stability in that space. And obviously we are working collaboratively with other players that are significant cash users to work through what is the longer-term sustainable plan for Armaguard.
Have you had to pause cash delivery with them? Has that actually transpired?
No.
No. Okay. Were that to happen, how would you actually manage that, and what would the consequences of that be?
I think that would be quite challenging. We definitely have a policy of having cash transaction in all of our stores. We consider that to be important, particularly because we know that people in regional areas, but also people that are lower socioeconomic cohorts tend to have a higher use of cash, and they are definitely cohorts that we would want to make sure that we're advocating for good outcomes for. So continuing to being able to maintain the provision of cash transactions and cash out in our stores is important to us.
Thank you. And my last question relates to the many different allegations that we've heard about intimidation, about bullying, about pressure, to provide particularly fresh fruit and veg at particular prices. And I acknowledge that, you used very similar terminology to Woolworths around, partnering with suppliers. That is inconsistent, as Senator Kim said, with the evidence that we have received. What is the response of Coles, and what are your discussions at board level around, what is the basis of these allegations? If you aren't seeing it, but we're getting so many people coming forward and saying this is what's happening, obviously something isn't right somewhere.
Yeah, I might, if I may, give Vicki the floor on this one to just talk it through.
Thank you, Senator. In relation to the allegations that have been made throughout the inquiry, I note that the suppliers, the few that have identified themselves, have not been direct suppliers to Coles. What I would say is if there are any suppliers that any of you know of or that have come to you that claim that Coles has not treated them fairly, we would invite those suppliers and yourselves to meet with us, so you're in the room, and we can talk through any issue, because that is not consistent with the way we do business.
That's absolutely huge. Good on you. There we go.
Thank you, because the challenge is that people are afraid to speak, but that I agree with Senator Sterle. That is, an important offer. Thank you.
So I think maybe just to build on that, it's not consistent with our values that we have as an organisation, or the culture that I would want Coles to have as the CEO, for us to be in a situation with, as you mentioned, our partners, and we do consider them our partners, to be in a position where they are afraid to speak out. We have certainly made changes to the way that we do training, the way we engage with suppliers over the last couple of years, as we have received feedback from the independent reviewer through the Food and Grocery Code. But we are certainly eager to understand what it is that we can do more, because high levels of fear of retribution are not something that benefits any of us. And we would certainly look to any provisions or measures that can be put in place that can improve that.
Thank you both for your evidence and your time. That's it from me, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Kovacic. Senator Sterle.
Thanks, Chair. And Senator Kovacic's gone to my heart of a lot of my questions. That's great stuff. I really, really admire that opportunity. Thank you. So there's a challenge for everyone, because I want to do it with the truckies as well, with you. You knew that one was coming. Look, firstly, Ms Weckert, can I just please pass on to the Coles, everyone in Coles, what a magnificent job they did through the pandemic. It's just a shame it took a pandemic before these valued workers were noticed by the rest of the nation. I also want to just make I've got to do this, Ms Bond, sorry to embarrass you. I just have to declare that I've had a very close working relationship with Ms Bond. And when you were in the business of running the roadhouses through your Coles Express business, Ms Bond and I worked together very closely with Ben, my right-hand man, and you are a credit to the trucking industry. The long-distance truckies really appreciated the work that you did, Ms Bond. Thank you very much in upgrading the toilets and showers around the nation. Every time we raised an issue, you were onto it very quickly. So well done. We're going to miss you in that part. Now, I just want to come back to... Now, my colleagues will probably want to take me out the back and give me a bit of a flogging, but I'm happy with that. It's not the first time.
We will not be doing
but
that,
I want to come back to this one. Some have offered it. We talk about competition, and I just have to keep going down the broken record path, because where I live in WA, there is a heck of a lot of places you can go and shop. But I just want to say this to my colleagues, and I know that the US gets mentioned. And I've just woken up to the fact I've been asleep at the wheel for most of for the morning, because I've forgotten to mention this. Nobody in this nation should proudly say they want Walmart in our country. Walmart's business model is based on wage theft. So we want competition. We want to get cheaper than what Coles and Woolies do it. Are we really asking to have the Walmart model imported into our nation? No, thank you. It'll take my focus off Aldi for a few months, I can tell you, if Walmart came here. So I would just urge my colleagues to have a serious think when we're calling for the role models of the US and the UK, because that's not what I want to see here.
Sure, Senator Sterle will come to a question.
I will. Do you wish to comment, Ms Weckert?
On Walmart specifically, or competition?
Absolutely. Have you looked at their model?
I think we certainly look at Walmart to understand from their business what are the things that we think we can learn from them. I would say that the areas where we take learnings are in particular probably in the digital space, and what they have done to be able to engage with their customers and drive a really good experience in terms of the online shopping space. I think that's something that they do very well. But obviously we have had Amazon come and enter into... I
haven't even got to them yet, but you may as well
enter into Australia here, they are definitely raising the bar in terms of the speed of delivery for product and the ease of the experience that customers have.
Yep, because we know that the likes, we've had a lot of conversations around the gig economy and that sort of stuff in this nation, and this is topical because we just voted on a piece of legislation here to address that. Not everyone voted on it, but I know I did, and I'm proud that we got it through. Now, I want to just go to, because Senator Kovacic has touched on, you've answered that, that's great for me. But you did mention in your opening statement that you have the Coles signed the heads of agreement with the TWU. I know, I witnessed it, I was there with Mr Kane, both Mr Kanes actually, in South Australia in Adelaide some 5 years ago. But I do want to offer this to you, that I said the same to Woolworths. I'm not holding my breath on governments coming to you, so I'm coming to you. I would like to start now working with your people on how we can get productivity through your DCs in terms of turning our truckies around, our interstate truckies in particular, who we know, not all of them are filling in the logbook properly because they're caught in your DCs, and I know I'm not blaming you for it. We've got to fix it. So I'll put that offer to you. When can I start working with your people outside of this? So we can really get these trucks turned around, because, as you know, we want them safe. We don't want them sitting around your DCs moving 30 metres every half an hour for the next 4 hours, and how we can be more productive to not only get them home, but they can get their other loads to get home, their back loads that aren't in your DCs.
I would say, and maybe you can build on this, Vicki, but the truck turnaround time is absolutely a key safety metric for us, and we're definitely interested in engaging in any measures that can continue to improve that.
And Senator, thank you for the question. As you know, through our charter with the TWU, 3 of the key areas that we're working with them on is 2 of the key areas is driver safety and mental health as well. And with the TWU, we've been running programs within our distribution centres with the truck drivers that work for our partners, and one of the key things we are focused on is fatigue management and driver safety. In terms of turnaround times, our logistics partners book time within a 24-hour window to deliver to our distribution centres, and they've got usually a 30 to 60-minute leeway on either side. Now, what that enables us to do is to make sure we've got the resources on the ground in the distribution centres to receive the load. So from the moment a truck comes in and they're on dock, so they're about to unload the product, we start working really efficiently with the truck driver to turn it around as quickly as possible and get them off dock or out of the DC. When truck drivers enter our distribution centres, we do require them to complete a declaration, and that declaration is focused on fatigue management and the management of their logbooks, because the last thing we want to do is a business who highly values safety is to put the safety of truck drivers and any other road users in jeopardy. If in our distribution centre there's something that we're doing, or there's been an incident that's occurred that may slow down the process, we immediately get in touch with our logistics providers to let them know, so then we don't have truck drivers sitting at our distribution centres for a lengthy period going over their rest breaks. So we would be very happy to work with you and continue as we have been with the TWU.
Tremendous, because I have no doubt that you have all the, I know you do, I know you have all the principles in place and all that. Whether it filters down all the time everywhere is where I would like to focus more. And I know that's not intent, but we need to fix that up. And Senator Kovacic, good on you, because you stole me thunder. That was a great announcement, that.
You done,
Yeah, I've actually lost for words. Yeah.
We can make it a shared announcement and shared thunder, Senator Sterling.
I'm wrapped.
All right.
We shall get these answers every Senator.
All right, thanks, Senator Still and Senator Kovacic. We're very close to the scheduled time for a break, so I'll now adjourn the committee, and we'll...
Senator McKim, sorry, I did suggest I had questions too.
No. Sorry, Senator Pratt.
For a break.
This is a short suspension for a break. So I'll now I will suspend the committee hearing for 15 minutes, and we will resume with